The black SUV pulled up outside the old building, and David Chen didn't want to get out. He sat in the back seat scrolling through his phone, ignoring the peeling paint on the walls and the rusted playground equipment visible through the car window. "Mr. Chen, they're waiting for you," his assistant Rachel said from the front seat, her voice careful and polite the way it always was when she knew he was in a bad mood. David sighed heavily and pocketed his phone. This whole thing was a waste of his time. A charity visit to a children's shelter, photos for the company website, another tax write-off his accountant had insisted would look good. He'd rather be anywhere else. The director of Harmony House met him at the door. Mrs. Patterson was a small woman in her 60s with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked hard for many years. She smiled too brightly, the way people did when they needed something from him. "Mr. Chen, thank you so much for coming. The children are so excited to meet you." David forced a smile. He'd perfected this expression over years of business meetings and charity galas, the smile that looked real in photographs but meant absolutely nothing. Inside, the shelter smelled like industrial cleaner and something he couldn't quite identify. Maybe old carpet. Maybe years of too many people living in too small a space. The walls were covered with children's artwork and motivational posters that had started to curl at the edges. Everything looked tired. A group of kids sat in the common room, arranged on worn couches and folding chairs. They ranged from maybe 6 years old to teenagers. Some looked excited. Others looked like they'd seen this before. Rich people coming through with cameras and leaving without changing anything. David went through the motions. He shook hands. He asked their names and forgot them immediately. He posed for photos with his arm around kids who leaned away slightly, uncomfortable with this stranger in an expensive suit. Rachel took notes about which shots would work best for social media. After 20 minutes, David checked his watch. How much longer did he have to stay? He had a meeting at 4. Important people waiting. "Mr. Chen," Mrs. Patterson said, touching his elbow gently. "Before you go, would you like to see our activity room? We have some very talented children here." David wanted to say no. He wanted to get back in his SUV and forget this place existed. But Rachel gave him a look that meant he should agree, so he nodded. The activity room was even more depressing than the common area. Mismatched tables and chairs, shelves with broken board games and puzzles missing pieces, art supplies that had seen better days, and in the corner, an upright piano that looked like it had survived a war. The piano was an ugly brown color, scratched and dented. Several keys were chipped. David could see from across the room that it was in terrible condition. "One of our girls plays," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice warming with pride. "She taught herself mostly. We don't have funds for proper lessons, but she practices every single day on that old thing." David looked at the piano and felt something cold settle in his chest. He turned away quickly. "That's nice," he said, the words automatic and empty. "Would you like to hear her play?" Mrs. Patterson asked. And that's when something mean-spirited in David woke up. Maybe it was being dragged here against his will. Maybe it was the way this place reminded him of things he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. Maybe he was just tired of pretending to care about things that didn't matter to him anymore. "Sure," David said, and then he laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. "Tell you what, if she can actually play that piano, I'll adopt her myself." He said it loud enough that several staff members heard. He meant it as a joke, obviously. A cruel one, but a joke. Because that piano was junk, and what kind of real talent could come out of a place like this? Rachel's eyes went wide. Mrs. Patterson's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered it. "I'll get her," Mrs. Patterson said quietly, and left the room. David immediately regretted it. Not because he felt bad, but because now he'd have to stand there and listen to some kid bang on a broken piano before he could leave. He should have just kept his mouth shut. Rachel stepped closer. "Sir, maybe we should—" "It's fine," David cut her off. "It'll take 2 minutes." Mrs. Patterson returned with a girl who looked about 12 years old. She was small for her age, with long, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a faded purple sweater that was slightly too big for her. When she walked into the room, she kept her eyes down, her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to take up less space in the world. "This is Lily Rodriguez," Mrs. Patterson said, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Lily, this is Mr. Chen. He'd like to hear you play." The girl looked up for just a moment, and David saw her eyes. Dark brown, serious, carrying something heavy that 12-year-olds shouldn't have to carry. "I'm not very good," Lily said softly. "The piano is broken." "It's okay, sweetheart," Mrs. Patterson encouraged. "Just play what you've been practicing." Lily walked to the piano like she was approaching something sacred. She sat on the bench, adjusted her position, and placed her small hands on the damaged keys. For a moment, she was completely still. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, like she was apologizing for making sound. But within seconds, something extraordinary happened. The music grew stronger, more confident. The melody was beautiful and sad all at once, the kind of music that reached into your chest and grabbed hold of something you'd forgotten was there. David recognized the piece, Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major. He knew it because his daughter used to play it. His daughter who had been gone for 5 years. His daughter whose music room he'd locked and never opened again. The broken piano shouldn't have sounded this good. Some keys stuck. Others were clearly out of tune. But Lily played around the imperfections like she'd made friends with them, turning flaws into part of the music itself. David stood frozen. He couldn't move. Couldn't look away. This girl, this child from a shelter with nothing, was playing with more soul than professional musicians he'd heard at concert halls. Every note carried weight. Every phrase told a story, and the story was about loss, about missing someone, about holding on to memories through the only language that made sense when words weren't enough. David's throat tightened. His carefully constructed walls started to crack. Lily played the entire piece without stopping. When the final notes faded, the room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The girl took her hands off the keys and folded them in her lap, looking down again. Mrs. Patterson had tears on her cheeks. Rachel was staring at David with an expression he couldn't read. The other staff members who'd gathered in the doorway stood perfectly still. David realized with a sinking feeling in his stomach that he'd just made a promise. A stupid, careless promise made in mockery and overheard by a dozen witnesses. A promise to adopt a child if she could play piano, and she could play. She could really, really play. He looked at Lily, still sitting at the broken piano with her head down, and something shifted inside him. Not enough to change everything, but enough to make him wonder what he'd just done. "Well," he said finally, his voice rougher than he intended, "I suppose I need to talk to my lawyer." 3 days later, David sat in his lawyer's office wondering how his life had gotten so complicated so quickly. "Let me get this straight," Michael said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You told them you'd adopt a child if she could play piano, and now you actually have to do it?" "I don't have to do anything," David said, but even he didn't believe that. "It was a joke, obviously. A joke that 12 people heard you make," Michael pointed out, "including your assistant, who apparently posted about your generous offer on the company's social media before you could stop her." David groaned and put his head in his hands. The post had gone viral overnight. Thousands of comments calling him inspiring, news outlets picking up the story, his board of directors sending congratulatory emails about his humanitarian gesture. He was trapped, and he knew it. "What are my options?" he asked. Michael was quiet for a moment. "Legally, you could walk away. It was an informal statement, not a binding contract. But the PR damage would be significant, very significant. And if I go through with it, foster care first, trial period, then adoption proceedings if it works out. We're looking at 6 months minimum before anything is finalized." 6 months. David could survive 6 months. He'd treat it like a business arrangement. Provide the basics. Keep the kid at arm's length. Eventually everyone would forget about this mess and he could go back to his normal life. "Set it up," David said. 2 weeks later, Lily stood in the entrance of David's penthouse apartment. clutching a single duffel bag that held everything she owned. She turned slowly, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine, the complete absence of anything that felt like home. "Your room is down this hall," David said, walking quickly without looking back to see if she followed. "Bathroom is attached. Mrs. Torres comes in during the day to cook and clean. She'll make sure you have what you need." He opened a door to a guest bedroom. It was nice, expensive, completely impersonal. White walls, gray bedding, nothing on the walls. Lily stepped inside and set down her bag. "School starts next week," David continued, his tone businesslike. "We've enrolled you at Westside Academy. It's a good school. Mrs. Torres will handle transportation until we figure out something more permanent." "Okay," Lily said quietly. "I work long hours," David said. "I'm usually gone by 7 in the morning and back around 9 at night. Later sometimes. You'll need to be independent. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, just David is fine." Lily nodded but didn't say anything. David looked at her standing there, so small in this big empty room, and felt uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name. He didn't know what else to say. "Get settled in," he said finally, and left. He heard the door close softly behind him. The first week was awkward. David left early every morning before Lily woke up. He came home late, after she'd gone to bed. Mrs. Torres reported that the girl was polite, quiet, and spent most of her time in her room doing homework or reading. "She doesn't eat much," Mrs. Torres said on Thursday. "I make nice meals, but she only takes a little bit. Like she's afraid to take too much. Kids from shelters are probably used to rationing," David said, not looking up from his laptop. "Mr. Chen?" Mrs. Torres said, her voice gentler. "She asked me something yesterday." "What?" "She wanted to know if there was a piano in the apartment." David's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "Tell her no," he said. But that was a lie, and he knew Mrs. Torres knew it was a lie. There was a piano in the apartment. A beautiful Steinway grand piano in a room at the end of the hall. A room that had been locked for 5 years. His daughter's room. The second week, David came home early one Tuesday. He'd had a meeting canceled and decided to work from home for the afternoon. When he walked in around 4, he expected silence. Instead, he heard crying. He followed the sound down the hallway and found Lily sitting on the floor outside the locked music room, her back against the wall, tears streaming down her face. In her hands, she held a photograph. David recognized it immediately. It must have fallen behind a hallway table. A family photo from 7 years ago. Him, his late wife Jennifer, and their daughter Amy at the beach. Everyone smiling. Everyone happy. When life was completely different. Lily looked up at him with red eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, trying to wipe her tears away. "I wasn't snooping, I promise. I dropped my pencil and it rolled under the table and I found this picture and it's fine," David said, his voice tight. "Just put it back. Is this your family?" Lily asked quietly. It was. What happened? David should have walked away. He should have told her it was none of her business. But something about the way she asked, like she already knew the answer, made him pause. "Car accident," he said. 5 years ago, my wife died instantly. My daughter died 2 days later in the hospital." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My parents died in a car accident too. 3 years ago. I was in the car with them, but I only got a broken arm." David looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd moved in. He saw the same kind of pain he carried reflected back at him. "Sometimes I think it should have been me," Lily continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I think they'd still be alive if I wasn't in the car. If they hadn't been driving me to my piano lesson." "Don't," David said sharply. Then softer, "Don't think like that. It wasn't your fault." "Was it your fault?" "What? Your family. Was it your fault they died?" "No, of course not." "Then why do you act like it was?" The question hit him like a punch to the chest. He didn't have an answer. Lily stood up, still holding the photograph. "Your daughter was beautiful. She looks happy in this picture." "She was," David said. "She loved music. She played piano every day after school." "Like me?" Lily said. "Yes, like you." They stood there in the hallway, 2 people carrying the same kind of grief, not knowing what to say to each other. Finally, Lily held out the photograph. "I understand why you locked that door. When my parents died, I didn't want to touch the piano for 6 months. It hurt too much. Everything reminded me of my mom. She was the one who taught me to play. David took the photo, his hands shaking slightly. But then I realized something, Lily continued. The piano wasn't the thing that hurt. The memories weren't what hurt. What hurt was pretending they never existed. So I started playing again, not to forget but to remember. She looked at the locked door, then back at David. I don't want to replace your daughter, she said. I could never do that. But if you ever want to open that door, I'd like to play for her, the way I played for my mom, because I think people we love would want us to keep making music even when they're gone. David couldn't speak. His throat felt too tight. His eyes burned. Lily turned and walked back to her room, leaving him alone in the hallway with a photograph and a locked door and a weight on his chest that had been there for 5 years. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about what Lily had said. Around 2 a.m, he got up and walked to the music room. He stood outside the door for a long time, his hand on the doorknob, but he couldn't turn it. Not yet. He walked past Lily's room on the way back to his own and noticed a small light under her door. She was awake too, both of them alone in their separate rooms, carrying grief too heavy to share. David went back to bed, but he didn't sleep. And for the first time in 5 years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry this weight by himself anymore. David started coming home earlier. He told himself it was because he needed to check on how things were going, make sure the arrangement was working. But the truth was different, and he knew it. He was curious about Lily. She'd been living with him for almost a month now, and he'd noticed small things. The way she organized her school books by color, how she always made her bed with the corners perfectly tucked, the fact that she never asked for anything, not once. One evening, David came home at 6 to find Mrs. Torres packing up to leave. Dinner is in the oven, she said, pulling on her coat. The girl did her homework already. She's in her room. She's always in her room, David said. Mrs. Torres gave him a look, maybe because there's nowhere else for her to be. After she left, David stood in his quiet apartment and realized how empty it felt. He walked to Lily's door and knocked softly. Come in, her voice said. She was sitting on her bed with a notebook, writing something. When she saw him, she quickly closed it. Just checking in, David said awkwardly. How's school? It's good. Making friends? Some. The conversation felt forced, like neither of them knew how to talk to the other. David was about to leave when he noticed something on her desk. A library book about classical composers. You're reading about music? He asked. Lily nodded. I'm trying to learn more. Since I never had proper lessons, I don't know a lot of the theory and history, just what I could teach myself. Your mother taught you the basics? Yeah, she was really good. She played in a symphony before I was born. She gave it up to raise me, but she always said she'd go back to it someday. But she didn't get the chance. No, Lily said quietly. She didn't. David sat down in the chair by her desk. He didn't plan to. It just happened. My daughter wanted to be a concert pianist, he said. She was only 10, but she was serious about it. Practiced 2 hours every day without me or her mom ever having to remind her. What was her name? Lily asked. Amy. That's a pretty name. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lily said something that surprised him. Can I ask you something? And you can say no, I won't be upset. What is it? The music room. The one that's locked. Would it be okay if I played the piano in there? I don't want to disturb anything or mess with your daughter's things. I just really miss playing. The shelter piano was terrible, but at least I could practice. David felt his chest tighten. He'd been avoiding this conversation, avoiding this decision. But looking at Lily now, seeing the hope and fear mixed in her expression, he realized she wasn't asking for much. She was asking to do the one thing that brought her comfort. Let me think about it, he said. The disappointment on her face was quick, but she hid it well. Okay, she said. Thank you for considering it. That night, David couldn't focus on work. He kept thinking about the music room, about Amy's piano sitting silent and unused, about Lily sitting in her bedroom with nothing but a library book about music she couldn't play. Around midnight, he made a decision. He got up, walked to the music room, and took the key from his desk drawer where he'd kept it for 5 years. His hand shook as he put it in the lock. The click sounded impossibly loud in the quiet apartment. David pushed the door open. Everything was exactly as Amy had left it. the Steinway grand piano gleaming in the moonlight from the window, music books stacked neatly on the bench, a stuffed bear sitting on top of the piano, a gift from her 8th birthday, photos on the wall of Amy at various recitals, smiling with medals and certificates. David walked into the room and the memories hit him like a wave. He could almost hear Amy practicing, the same pieces over and over until she got them perfect. He could almost see Jennifer sitting in the armchair by the window, reading while their daughter played. His eyes filled with tears. He'd locked this room because the pain was too much. But standing here now, he realized Lily had been right. Avoiding the memories didn't make them hurt less. It just made him forget the joy that came with them. He sat at the piano bench and lifted the cover over the keys. The piano was probably out of tune after 5 years of silence. He pressed middle C. The note rang out clear and true. David didn't play. He'd never been musical like his wife and daughter. But he sat there, his hands resting on the keys, and let himself remember the good times, the laughter, the music that had filled this apartment before everything went dark. He didn't know how long he sat there. Eventually, he stood up, took one last look around the room, and left. But this time, he didn't lock the door. The next morning, David waited for Lily to wake up. When she came out of her room, rubbing sleep from her eyes, he was standing in the hallway. "The music room," he said. "It's open. You can use it whenever you want." Lily's eyes went wide. "Really? Really? Just take care of the piano. And Amy's things, leave them where they are." "I will. I promise." "Thank you, David. Thank you so much." She looked like she wanted to hug him but wasn't sure if she should. David wasn't sure either, so instead he just nodded and went to make coffee. An hour later he heard it. The first notes from the piano in 5 years. Lily was playing something soft and beautiful, something he didn't recognize. The sound filled the apartment, and instead of pain, David felt something else. Something lighter. He stood in the kitchen listening and realized he was smiling. Over the next few weeks, things changed. Lily practiced every day after school. David found himself coming home earlier and earlier, timing his arrival to when she usually played. He'd sit in his study with the door open, working while her music drifted through the apartment. They started having dinner together, real conversations, not just awkward small talk. Lily told him about school, about the kids in her class, about the teacher who was helping her catch up in math. David told her about work, simplifying the complex business deals into stories she could understand. One evening, David came home to find Lily in the music room, but she wasn't playing. She was looking at the photos of Amy on the wall. "She looks like she was happy," Lily said when she noticed him in the doorway. She was, most of the time. She had her struggles like any kid. But yeah, she was happy. "I think she would have been a great pianist. I think so too." Lily turned to face him. "David, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When Mrs. Patterson first told me someone wanted to hear me play, I was scared. I knew the shelter piano was broken. I knew I wasn't really good. I thought whoever it was would laugh at me." "I'm sorry I made that joke," David said. "It was cruel." "No, that's not what I mean." "I mean, yes, it was kind of mean. But here's the thing. When I started playing and I saw your face change, I realized something. You weren't hearing me play. You were hearing someone else. Someone you missed." David swallowed hard. "My daughter played that same piece." "I know. I figured that out. And I want you to know that I'm not trying to be her. I could never be her. But if my playing helps you remember her, if it makes this apartment feel less empty, then I'm glad. Because you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "A home, not just a place to sleep, but an actual home. And maybe something like a family." David felt his eyes sting. He walked into the room and did something he hadn't done since the first day Lily arrived. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Not as an obligation or a PR problem or a temporary arrangement. He saw a brave kid who'd lost everything and was still trying to find ways to be kind. A girl who played music to honor her mother's memory. Someone who understood his pain because she carried the same weight. "Lily," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to tell you something. When I first brought you here, I thought this was temporary. I thought I'd do the 6 months and then find some reason why it wasn't working out." Her face fell slightly. "But I was wrong," he continued quickly. "These past few weeks, listening to you play, talking with you, watching you bring music back into this apartment, I've realized something. This place hasn't felt like a home in 5 years. And now it's starting to feel like one again, because of you. Really? Lily's voice was small, hopeful, really. So if you want to stay, not just for 6 months but permanently, I'd like that. I'd like to be your family if you'll let me. Lily's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that too. They stood there in Amy's music room, surrounded by memories of the past and the possibility of a future, and something fundamental shifted between them. They weren't strangers anymore. They weren't just a man fulfilling an obligation and a girl grateful for a place to stay. They were becoming something more, something that felt like the beginning of family. 2 months had passed since David opened the music room and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lily practiced piano every afternoon while David worked from home more often than not. They ate dinner together most nights. On weekends, they explored the city together, finding small restaurants and bookstores that Lily had never had the chance to visit before. David was reading the newspaper one Saturday morning when Lily walked into the kitchen, her face bright with excitement. "David, I need to show you something," she said. Pulling up a chair next to him, she placed a folded piece of paper on the table. It was a flyer from school. Westwood Music Academy, David read aloud. Annual auditions for their Young Performers program. "It's one of the best music schools in the state," Lily explained, her words tumbling out fast. "They take middle and high school students who are really serious about music. My mom always talked about auditioning there someday. She said it was her dream for me." David looked at the flyer more carefully. The audition was in 6 weeks. Requirements included performing 2 pieces from memory, demonstrating technical skill, and an interview with the faculty panel. "Do you want to audition?" he asked. "I don't know if I'm good enough," Lily admitted. "I've never had real lessons. Everything I know I taught myself from watching videos and reading books. The kids who audition there have been training with professional teachers for years. But you play beautifully." "Playing beautifully isn't the same as playing correctly. There's technique and theory and all these things I don't really understand." David set down the newspaper. "What does your heart tell you?" "That I want to try. That my mom would want me to try. But I'm scared I'll embarrass myself." "Lily, I've heard you play almost every day for months now. You have real talent. Raw talent, maybe, but it's there. If this is something you want, we should make it happen." "You mean it?" "I mean it. But we need to do this right. You'll need a teacher, someone who can help you prepare for the audition." Lily's face lit up, then fell just as quickly. "Teachers are expensive. I don't want you to spend—" "Stop," David said gently. "Let me worry about money. You worry about practicing." The next week, they met with a piano teacher named Helen Park. She was in her 70s, a retired concert pianist who still took on a few students. She came to the apartment, listened to Lily play for 10 minutes, and then asked her to stop. "How long have you been playing?" Helen asked. "Since I was 6. But I haven't had lessons since my mom died 3 years ago." Helen was quiet for a moment, her experienced eyes studying Lily carefully. "And you've been teaching yourself all this time?" "Yes, ma'am. Play the C major scale for me." "Both hands, 2 octaves," Lily played it. And David could see her fingers weren't positioned quite right. Helen watched closely, then asked her to play several more scales, some arpeggios and a few technical exercises. With each one, David could see Helen taking mental notes. Finally, Helen sat back in her chair. "You have significant technical gaps. Your finger positioning needs work. Your understanding of music theory is limited. Your sight reading is weak." Lily's shoulders sagged. "However," Helen continued, and her stern expression softened slightly, "you have something I cannot teach. You have musicality. You understand emotion in music. You play with your heart, not just your hands. That's rare, especially in someone so young who's had no formal training." "Does that mean you'll help her?" David asked. "It means I'm willing to try, but I need to be honest with both of you. 6 weeks is not much time. The students who audition for Westwood have been preparing their whole lives. Even with intensive work, Lily's chances are not good." "I understand," Lily said quietly. "But," Helen added, "I've been teaching piano for 50 years. I've seen thousands of students. Most have technique but no soul. A few have soul but no discipline. Very rarely I meet someone who has the potential for both. You might be one of those rare ones, Lily. But it will take hard work, harder than anything you've done before." "I'm ready," Lily said, and David heard the determination in her voice. The next 6 weeks were intense. Helen came 3 times a week, putting Lily through rigorous training. Scales and exercises for hours, theory lessons that made Lily's head spin, correction after correction on her technique and posture. David watched Lily struggle. Some nights she came out of practice sessions with tears in her eyes, frustrated that her hands wouldn't do what her brain told them to do. Other nights she was so exhausted she could barely eat dinner. "Maybe this is too much," David said one evening after a particularly hard lesson. "Maybe we should postpone, give you more time." "No," Lily said firmly. "My mom always said anything worth doing is worth doing even if it's hard. I want to do this for her, and for me." David saw his daughter Amy in that moment. The same determination, the same refusal to quit even when things got difficult. "Okay," he said, "but promise me something. No matter what happens at this audition, you'll remember that you're already amazing." The day of the audition arrived too quickly. David took the whole day off work, something he rarely did. They arrived at Westwood Music Academy an hour early. The building was beautiful, all glass and modern architecture with practice rooms lining the hallways. Other students and their parents filled the waiting area. David could hear snippets of conversation, parents talking about their children's teachers and accomplishments. One boy was warming up in a practice room, playing something impossibly complex and fast. He sounded like a professional. Lily gripped David's hand tightly. "Everyone here is so good," she whispered. "So are you," he whispered back. They called her name. Lily stood up and David could see her hands shaking. "You've got this," he said. "Just play like you do at home. Play for your mom." Lily nodded and walked into the audition room. David sat in the waiting area, unable to focus on anything. Minutes felt like hours. He checked his watch constantly. Other parents sat calmly, but he felt like his heart might beat out of his chest. After 30 minutes, the door opened and Lily came out. Her face was unreadable. "How did it go?" David asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I made some mistakes, but I finished both pieces." "I'm proud of you," David said, pulling her into a hug. "No matter what happens, I'm so proud of you." They were about to leave when someone called David's name. He turned to see 3 people walking toward them, members of the audition panel. "Mr. Chen, could we speak with you and Lily for a moment?" the woman in the center asked. David's stomach dropped. This couldn't be good. They wouldn't pull them aside unless something was wrong. They followed the panel into a small conference room. Everyone sat down and the silence felt heavy. The woman spoke first. "Lily, I'm Professor Davis, the head of Westwood's piano program. I want to talk to you about your audition." "Yes, ma'am," Lily said quietly. "Your technical skills need significant work. Your theory knowledge is behind where we'd typically expect. Your sight reading is weak." Lily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. David reached over and took her hand. "However," Professor Davis continued, "in my 20 years of directing this program, I have rarely heard someone play with the emotional depth you demonstrated today. When you played your second piece, Rachmaninoff's Prelude, you made 3 of our panel members cry." Lily looked up, surprised. "We understand from your application that you've had no formal training for 3 years. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am. I taught myself using library books and internet videos." Professor Davis exchanged glances with the other panel members. "That makes what you've accomplished even more remarkable. Most students with your level of emotional understanding have been studying for 10 years or more with top instructors." "What are you saying?" David asked, not daring to hope. "We'd like to offer Lily a conditional acceptance into our program," Professor Davis said. "She would need to take remedial classes in theory and technique, but we believe she has the raw talent to succeed here. The question is, Lily, are you willing to work harder than you've ever worked before?" Lily's tears spilled over, but now they were tears of joy. Yes, absolutely." "Good, we'll arrange your schedule next week. Welcome to Westwood Music Academy." They walked out of the building in a daze. David felt like he was floating. When they got to the car, Lily turned to him and started crying for real. Big sobbing tears of relief and happiness and disbelief. "I got in," she kept saying. "I actually got in. My mom would be so happy. She'd be so proud." David pulled her into a tight hug. "She would be, and so would Amy. And I'm proud of you too, Lily, so incredibly proud." They sat in the parking lot for a while, both of them crying and laughing. And David realized something important. When he'd made that careless joke at the shelter months ago, he thought he was losing something. His freedom, his privacy, his carefully controlled life. But he hadn't lost anything. He'd gained everything. He'd gained a daughter who brought music back into his life, who reminded him that it was okay to feel joy again, who showed him that broken people could help each other heal. That night, Lily played the piano for hours, practicing pieces she'd need to learn for her new school. David sat in his study listening, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt something he thought he'd never feel again. He felt like everything was going to be okay. 6 months later, David sat in the packed auditorium of Westwood Music Academy, his palms sweating despite the air conditioning. Around him, parents whispered excitedly, programs rustling as they waited for the winter recital to begin. This was Lily's first major performance at the academy. She'd been working impossibly hard, balancing regular school music theory classes, private lessons with Helen, and hours of daily practice. David had watched her transform from a self-taught girl with raw talent into a disciplined young musician who understood both the technical and emotional sides of her art. But he also knew she was nervous. That morning, she'd barely touched her breakfast. The lights dimmed and the audience quieted. Students began performing one by one, each one impressive in their own way. David tried to focus, but his mind kept jumping ahead to Lily's performance. Finally, the announcer spoke. "Our next performer is Lily Rodriguez, performing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." David's breath caught. That was the piece she'd played at the shelter, the piece that had started everything. Lily walked onto the stage in a simple black dress that Mrs. Torres had helped her pick out. She looked so small up there, so young, but when she sat at the grand piano and adjusted the bench, David saw something different in her posture. Confidence. Purpose. She placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes were soft and delicate, just like that day at Harmony House, but this time the playing was different. More refined, more controlled. Yet somehow it had lost none of its emotional power. If anything, the technical training had given her new ways to express the feelings she'd always carried in her music. David watched her play, and memories flooded through him. Amy playing this same piece in their living room, Jennifer sitting beside him, squeezing his hand as they listened to their daughter. The life he'd had before everything fell apart. But for the first time, those memories didn't only bring pain. They brought something else too. Gratitude, joy, a recognition that love didn't end just because life did. Lily's fingers moved across the keys with grace and precision. She'd added subtle touches that weren't there before, small interpretations that made the piece uniquely hers. The audience sat completely still, mesmerized. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the auditorium erupted in applause. People stood up, some wiping tears from their eyes. David stood too, clapping so hard his hands hurt, his vision blurry. Lily stood and bowed, and when she looked out into the audience, she found David's face. She smiled, and he smiled back, and in that moment, everything they'd been through together made sense. After the recital, families gathered in the lobby. David pushed through the crowd to find Lily, who was surrounded by other students and parents congratulating her. "That was beautiful," an older woman said. "How long have you been studying?" "About 6 months formally," Lily said. "But I've been playing since I was little." 6 months? "My son has been here for 3 years and doesn't play with half your emotion. You have a real gift." Professor Davis appeared beside them. "Lily, could I speak with you and your father for a moment?" They followed her to a quieter corner of the lobby. "I wanted you both to know," Professor Davis said, "that we've been very impressed with Lily's progress. She's caught up on most of her technical gaps much faster than we anticipated. Her theory grades are excellent, and her performance tonight was outstanding." "Thank you," Lily said, her face glowing. "I also wanted to discuss something with you. Mr. Chen, we're starting a new scholarship program here at Westwood, funded by several donors who want to help talented students from difficult backgrounds, students who might not otherwise have access to this kind of training." "That sounds wonderful," David said. "We'd like Lily to be one of the first recipients," Professor Davis continued. "Full scholarship, covering all her tuition and fees for as long as she's enrolled here." Lily's mouth fell open. "Really? Really? You've earned it." After Professor Davis left, Lily turned to David with tears in her eyes. "I can't believe this is happening. 6 months ago, I was at the shelter thinking I'd never play on a real piano again. And now you're exactly where you belong," David finished. They drove home in comfortable silence, both processing the evening. When they got to the apartment, Lily headed straight for the music room like she always did. But this time David followed her. "Can I sit and listen?" he asked. Of course. David settled into the armchair by the window, the same chair Jennifer used to sit in when Amy practiced. Lily began playing something new, a piece she'd been working on for her next assignment. As he listened, David's mind wandered to that day at the shelter. His cruel joke, his certainty that nothing would come of it, how wrong he'd been about everything. "Lily," he said during a pause in her playing, "can I tell you something?" She turned on the bench to face him. "Sure. When I first went to Harmony House, I was angry. Angry at the world, angry at myself, angry that I had to pretend to care about things that didn't matter to me anymore. I made that joke about adopting you because I wanted to hurt someone the way I was hurting. It was cruel and thoughtless, and I'm sorry for that. David, let me finish. I thought bringing you here would be a burden, a temporary obligation I'd get through and then move on from. But I was wrong about everything. You weren't a burden. You were a gift. You brought music back into this apartment. You reminded me that it's okay to feel things again. You showed me that loss doesn't have to mean the end of love." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I want you to know," David continued, his voice thick with emotion, "that I'm not doing any of this out of obligation anymore. Not the music lessons, not the school, not any of it. I'm doing it because you're my daughter now. Not by birth, but by choice, and that makes it even more real. You're my dad too," Lily said softly. "I know you didn't ask for this. I know you miss Amy and your wife. But you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. A family, a home, someone who believes in me." David stood up and crossed the room. He pulled Lily into a tight hug and they both cried. Not sad tears this time, but the kind of tears that come when something broken finally starts to heal. "I have something to show you," David said after a moment. He left the room and returned with a folder. Inside were papers, official documents with legal seals and signatures. "The adoption was finalized yesterday," he said. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you. You're officially a Chen now if you want to be, or you can keep Rodriguez, or use both, whatever feels right to you." Lily looked at the papers, her hands shaking. "Lily Rodriguez Chen," she said, testing it out. "I like that. It honors where I came from and where I am now." "Then that's what we'll do." They sat together in the music room, surrounded by memories of the past and hopes for the future. Amy's photos still hung on the walls, but they didn't feel like ghosts anymore. "They felt like blessings," Lily said. "I want to do something with my music. Something that matters." "Why, what do you mean?" "I want to help other kids like me. Kids in shelters or foster care who love music, but don't have access to instruments or lessons. I was thinking we could start a program. Buy pianos for shelters. Offer free lessons. Give kids a chance to find what I found." David felt his heart swell with pride. "That's a beautiful idea. We could call it Amy's Music Project, in honor of your daughter, and maybe we could use my mom's name too somehow. So both of them are remembered. The Amy and Isabella Music Foundation," David said. "I think that's perfect." Over the next few months, they made it happen. David used his business connections and resources to establish the foundation. They donated a brand new piano to Harmony House, along with funds for weekly lessons from qualified teachers. Mrs. Patterson cried when they unveiled it. They started small, helping one shelter at a time, but the word spread. Other donors came forward. Musicians volunteered their time. Within a year, they'd helped place instruments in 20 shelters across the state. Lily became the foundation's youth ambassador, visiting shelters and performing for kids who needed to see that someone like them could succeed. She never forgot where she came from. One evening, almost 2 years after that first day at the shelter, David and Lily sat together at dinner. They did this every night now, sharing stories about their days, making plans for the weekend, being the family neither of them thought they'd have again. "I got my report card today," Lily said. "Straight A's. I'm not surprised. You work harder than anyone I know. Helen says I'm ready to start thinking about college programs, real conservatories where I could study music seriously. We'll research them together," David promised. After dinner, Lily went to practice, and David stood in the doorway of the music room, listening. He thought about the journey they'd taken together, the pain they'd both carried, the healing they'd found in each other. His phone buzzed with an email, another shelter requesting help from the foundation. He smiled and made a note to follow up in the morning. The music filled the apartment, beautiful and alive. David closed his eyes and could almost feel Jennifer and Amy there with them, proud of what he and Lily had built together. He'd made a careless joke that day at the shelter, never imagining where it would lead. But that joke had become the most important promise he'd ever kept. It had brought him a daughter. It had brought